Welcome back to another episode of Soul Focused Radio. We're your hosts, Martina
and Martin.
Cindy is not with us today, but she'll be joining us for our next episode, which we're really excited about. How are you doing, Martin?
I'm doing really well. I was just thinking about, when we recorded the last intro, I said my name Martin like that. Mm-hmm. And this time I said more like Martin, which is what I usually say. And, I used to work with kids during the era of the TV show Martin, Martin. Yeah. And so they always used to call me Martin, right? And, but I was wondering, I guess it wouldn't work with Martina, right? Because there's that third syllable. So nobody ever says Martina, right? That just doesn't work, because our name is obviously identical except for one letter. But I was just realizing that the Martin doesn't work with your name.
We could try it.
Martina. No, it doesn't work. I don't think it works. Yeah.
You have to change that. It can't be Ian, be Martina.
Martina. All right. Yeah. Well, we can try. I'm not sure it's going to sweep the nation, but we could definitely try. Never know. So we're here to intro the second part of your and my conversation with Dr. Stephanie.
Yeah. It was great to have you come in. Always love having your perspective. We don't just want you to be silent as the sound engineer. Just want to say that. Yeah, it was great to continue the conversation with Dr. Stephanie and to talk a little bit more about those specific patient-provider relationships, both as a patient and as a provider, and what those dynamics can look like, and how does emotional vulnerability play into those.
Yeah. No, I love just listening, especially when, I love talking clearly, right? And also I love listening, especially because you all can get into a certain rhythm and flow that, I'll be part of the rhythm and flow, but it'll change with me there. So I love that we were able to, do that both. And even in this episode, I started off a little slow, but it was fascinating for me to, be able to ask you all questions about what emotional vulnerability looks like in a medical practice, because I've experienced it multiple ways. And I talk a little bit about sort of what my ideal medical practitioner is. And, I won't spoil that, but I do describe what that is for me. And I think you both really fit into that. So I really enjoyed the conversation.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Shall we let our listeners enjoy the conversation as well?
I think so.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, cool. Well, enjoy, listeners, and we'll be back.
When you come to the Soul Focus Group, you come to an acknowledgement that there has been injuries done to us from all these different forms of oppression. Injuries that have impacted our subconscious mind, our heart, our spirit, our very soul. So at the Soul Focus Group, we recognize that and we focus on healing. Healing, the return or the recovery of our connections to our healthy self, our beautiful thinking mind. We want you to come join us in a movement of healing all around the world to restore us back to our rightful state. At the Soul Focus Group, we heal.
Well, in our last episode, Dr. Stephanie, you just shared, you were just dropping so many bombs of wisdom. I was trying to just scribble over here with everything that you shared. So I would love to have some time for us to just kind of break things down and talk about a few of the things that stood out for all of us in that conversation.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Starting off for me, one of the things, and I think this is really sort of the root issue that stood out for me, and it's not my first time hearing you say it, but the first time I heard you say it, it was like kind of that mind-blowing experience when you talked about your professor in medical school saying that 95% of diseases and illness are caused by stress. Mm-hmm. So gosh, if you can treat stress, you're a magical doctor, because there's very little we do in medicine where we can treat 95% of the diseases.
Exactly.
And what I feel like you laid out in our last conversation was just really, how do we start treating stress for ourselves? And through that, as we manifest it, we're going to do the same for the people around us and kind of be a model and invite people in to this healing journey.
Yes. So first, studying stress, I had to figure out what is the root of it so that we can, pull it up and number one, stop creating more of it.
Absolutely.
And it's an inner work. I've used several modalities to assist me with seeing the root of stress. Currently, I can't think of some of the other programs, like landmark programs, different religious, Gnostics. Of course, I grew up in the Catholic Church. If you read the Bible, it talks about it in there. They may not use the word, but it's all there. It's always been in our face, right?
Mm.
And the root of it is when we do not have a deep relationship with that inner voice, that oneness. You could call it your God voice, your God self, your soul, whatever it is. It's the aspect of you that you're fighting against. And so we create this internal conflict within ourselves. And so, of course, if we internally conflicting with our inner guide, we're going to create doubt in our life. So when we look out in the world, we're not going to trust. We're going to be confused, right? And I'm saying that to say, I jumped there because I don't think we pay enough attention or give enough highlight or enough appreciation to our soul. This is Soul Focus Group, right? Who's delivering this message. Even though we've mentioned the soul in the world and in our conversations, and even in my own life, I noticed that sometimes I would hide it in converse because I don't, I looked at it as a religious thing sometimes, and you know how religious conversations can be very tricky.
Mm-hmm.
However, everybody has a soul.
Right.
To me, some people think some people don't have a soul. But I don't, if you come in this journey in the human suit, it's the soul as in this human suit, right?
Mm-hmm.
It enlivens the body, the physical body. So if this physical body is animated, there's something alive within it. And to me, I call it the soul. And the stress for me is when I don't recognize and understand my soul's purpose in my own life. And so I used to hide it. I used to not share it because people would have all kind of labels. Oh, you're too deep. Or what religion is that? That don't make no sense. Are you Muslim? Or are you Catholic? Or are you Buddhist? And then if I answered to one of those and they weren't a part of that culture, then there would be conflict. And so I kind of used to keep it to myself. And now I just don't. As you can see, that's what I talk about.
Well, I'm so glad you don't keep it to yourself. Something you said that gave me this really, I think, profound thought was, we think about if we're saying stress is this root cause of so much of our illness, this not being one within ourselves. So rare do we actually go to seek help because of our stress, right? It's only when stress has caused a physical symptom, at least for me in my practice, do then patients come in. But rarely do I have someone come in, no physical symptom, but saying, I'm stressed and I need help. And then if they did come in with that, I would be kind of at a loss of, with the tools that traditionally have been taught to me in medicine of what to do, right? That's where I'd have to tap into my teachings and the journey and what I've learned being part of Soul Focus Group that is actually going to be more healing. And so it made me think about, gosh, how different would it be if we as a society, as a community, treated stress as a symptom of disease, just like we do a runny nose as a symptom of a cold. And then we're going to, I guess nowadays, do a COVID test start treating it. And that's our red flag. Like, I need to take care of myself. How different would things look?
Very different. That's powerful. Just to be able to paint that picture and imagine, like we talked about it early in this conversation about the medical system. You just imagine the different medical system.
Right.
Thank you for painting that picture.
It's something I was thinking about in our last conversation to share is, and I've mentioned this before on the podcast, I think when I first came on with Martin, is in China, traditionally, doctors were paid every day that you were well.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment you got sick, you stopped getting paid because you didn't do your job.
Exactly. Yep. I'm very aware of that. I like that model.
Right? It's exactly what you were saying. You know, our system, we profit when people are ill.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I only make, my clinic only can bill for a service when someone comes in because they're sick.
Mm-hmm.
And the sicker they are, the higher I can bill for.
That's
so what
right.
a perverse incentive. And I imagine it's similar with podiatry.
Very similar, yes. It's the same system.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not, I want to always make it clear, we're not downing, the system we created. It has its place.
Right.
It has its place. However, just like in the inner labyrinth, when we keep going, we discover more and we expand. Mm-hmm. So in the medical system, we kind of got stuck. And this system does a very good job at emergency medicine. I mean,
oh
my God. I would definitely go to emergency if I was in a tragic accident before I go to Eastern medicine.
Absolutely.
And I've experienced that this time. Like, I tried to do herbal medicine. And it just wasn't enough time to get me grounded. That's things you do over when you're well and you want to maintain. Right. But I needed emergency help. Mm-hmm. In this system, it got me stable so that I can go to the Eastern style. Right. And I don't like to use Eastern Western, but more daily maintenance and learning about how to feed my body in particular and what it's looking for. And not just my body, but my mind and my spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And you're absolutely right. I feel like I don't want herbs when I've been in an accident or if I have something, where I need surgery. Mm-hmm. We are very good at acute care, at surgical care. Mm-hmm. Where, like you said, I think we've gotten stuck is how do we actually promote health or even define health?
Exactly. And the other aspect of, the acute care is the diagnostic tools. Oh, I've been so grateful to be able to look inside my body with all of the tools that were presented to me. I've learned so much, So it's an and. It's not a versus.
Yes. I'm glad you made that distinction.
And that's the wanting. The wanting is an and. It's not like this versus that. It's like, everybody has a purpose. Let's bring all of these purposes together.
Right. Mm-hmm. We're not in competition, right? That's when we're in our ego.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So, the building on a model that treats stress. I think you mentioned that was a mouthful of what you said, Martina. When the patient comes in, and let's say they come in and say, I'm just stressed. There's no code for that.
No.
In our billing. So we basically would have to default to just, this is a conversation, and just treat them as like a brother or sister. Like, I'm talking to my brother or sister, Mm-hmm. And then if they booked an appointment in the business, how much time do we have to talk to them? Because sometimes it could take an hour to get to that. And I always ask the patient, I'm definitely willing to talk to you, but you have to be willing to wait. Because would it be fair for me to talk to you for an hour and then a patient who has that appointment that was 10 minutes after yours. Now they wait, and then the next one wait, and the next one wait. What if that was you on the other end?
Right.
And so, we just have to be patient as we, create this different kind of system, and just be aware that everything's so connected. So yes, I want to take hours with each patient. However, there's 24 hours in a day, and usually business time is 9 to 5, and we have appointments. So just be patient and being willing to, because after hours, I talk to my patients. They all have my cell number.
Wow. Oh, you're amazing.
Yes. They don't take advantage of it. So that's so far, I'm okay with it. When they really need to talk, they're called.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, Martin, how this conversation, kind of as a non-medical practitioner, but someone who has experienced the healthcare system, how kind of what your thoughts are.
Well, my thoughts are all over the place, but first of all, just it's an honor really to just listen to you all talk, and I love the depth that we're getting to around these issues, and I'm just really thinking so much about emotional vulnerability, and I think Dr. Stephanie and Martina, both of you, especially your story, Dr. Stephanie, is you didn't use the words emotional vulnerability a lot, but you showed it. You modeled it, and in telling your own story of your own experience with illness. And first of all, thank you for sharing that, and I'm glad to hear that you're doing better. Obviously, going to hold you in my healing prayers as you continue to get, to as we would say, 100% equal to yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
That health is getting back equal to yourself and nobody else's standard. So, praying for you as you get back to that place. So obviously that was impactful for me to hear that. And I think as I've experienced both of you, and I've actually had the pleasure of experiencing Dr. Stephanie to a certain extent in a consultation, medical consultation with a family member that, I was like able to be on and, not just listen to, but participate in. And, so, I'm really clear that, you really bring yourself. And I think as somebody that's experienced the medical profession and never been in it as a practitioner, I think that, a lot of times it doesn't feel like our practitioners are bringing their full selves. And that's why I would say that emotional vulnerability often feels absent or diminished in a traditional Western medical relationship. So, and then I also know that, there's also boundaries. So I think one of the things I'm really curious on is how do you all bring your full self? How do you show emotional vulnerability and not cross boundaries that could be detrimental to the patient or their families?
And what do you mean by detrimental to the family? Give me more details of what you mean by that.
Well, I feel like sometimes, I think sometimes I mostly, most of my experience or a lot of my experience has been with therapy. And I had experience with a therapist back in Ohio when I was an adolescent, and she really helped me out a lot. She really helped me like leave my home and go across the country and really expand and open my life. And I also saw her not hold boundaries that I thought were essential to, really holding the mental health of her patients. She saw people that knew each other. She shared a lot about her own life, which I think over time became problematic, and also, shared things with other people. So what I mean is, when you all bring your full selves, when you show emotional vulnerability, is there a danger of harming a patient in some way or crossing a line that you feel is necessary to keep? That's my question. I don't know. Is that clear, Dr. Stephanie, or am I still not really being 100% clear?
I kind of know where you're going. And I'll in my response, you can tell me. So, what I've noticed myself, I've had to watch out for projecting. So a lot of times a patient will have a symptom or say something and I can relate. And then if I don't be mindful, I can kind of forget why they came to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would start projecting my stuff onto them.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been a danger spot.
Mm-hmm.
Because then now they start treating me a lot. And I noticed that because a lot of times when I would go to different professionals, I end up being the treater, like treating the patient. I mean, the professional who I was going to for help. And I know that's a boundary that I had to watch out for, especially myself, because now I only do home visits, and it's mostly with seniors, and they have a lot of wisdom. And so sometimes I catch myself going to them, asking them, for advice, which is not a bad thing, but knowing the difference between this is my auntie or my uncle who I'm asking, which we can have that conversation, but to also keep in mind and stay grounded on, okay, this is my patient. They came to me also. They asking me for podiatry help, and to stay focused on if they have pain in their left big toe. Make sure before I leave that I address that, because I can go all over the place with them when we get into mental and spiritual conversations. But before I leave them, I always make sure that we address whatever they came for, so they can see the connection. Because sometimes the spiritual and mental is important, because we know, the physical is just representing the mental and spiritual. But if I don't 360 that conversation, they won't get it. So I 360 it back.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. I think that's a really good example. So that's really helpful. What about you, Martina? What is your thought about my question?
Yeah, I think for me, there's definitely, so I treat a lot of family members because I'm working for the Puyallup tribe. It's a small community of folks that we're taking care of. And so I do care for many family members. So I have to be really cognizant of keeping, the law, HIPAA barriers of I cannot share information, even though if it's like, oh, I saw your auntie this morning, I have to catch myself to not say things like that because that's part of the privacy that I need to respect of the patient. So there's definitely that barrier sometimes when we're having, casual conversations or catching up in the beginning of the visit, where I have to be really cognizant of not saying like, oh yeah, your auntie told me this today when I saw them, because I'm not allowed to let them know that I saw their auntie. So that's one of the things I think about that I'm really aware of, just in sort of being able to start relating with people personally, because that's not really the medical conversation we're having. It's sort of that social piece. I think for me, what I'm noticing, especially for patients who we might have experienced similar symptoms, that we feel the same about those symptoms. I have to really catch myself with that. And I think specifically, our listeners know I have a kiddo, so taking care of pregnant patients, that people feel the same about the shared symptoms we may have had while being pregnant or while giving birth. And so I do think there's a richness in being able to share a little bit of my own experience of being pregnant or giving birth. However, I do have to be really cautious that people are going to feel the same way, or not. I guess I'm trying to say, not projecting that because this is how I felt about this symptom or this experience of pregnancy or giving birth, that they will feel the same way, or the same with like breastfeeding. So trying to find that balance of sharing my own experiences and being emotionally vulnerable with, yeah, that's really hard, or this was really hard for me, or this wasn't really hard for me, but then trying to not have patients feel like there's judgment in that, or that I'm expecting them to feel the same way about something. So I think that's the piece that I'm finding I have to create more clear boundaries for. Does that answer your question?
That's really helpful, because I think on a previous conversation that Martina and I had, Dr. Stephanie, we talked about crying, and that, when you lose somebody, that you're, a patient or somebody that you're close to, but there are these standards of not crying. And so, I think it's, great for, us to get this window. I love these podcast segments, because it gives those of us not healthcare practitioners an opportunity to get windows into your world and your feelings. And, because so many people in Western medicine have been taught to be like more like blank walls. My mother was ill recently with congestive heart failure and some other stuff going on. And I spent a lot of time with her and doctors. And my favorite doctor of all was a woman from the Caribbean, black woman, black doctor. She was a cardiologist, and she was super relational. She was funny. She was interested. She was kind. She took a lot of time. She took like an hour with my mom, and I could just see the difference, to doctors that didn't bring those things. And so that feels to me like a way to bring your full self and not cross a line, whether it's a legal like HIPAA line or whether it's like that projection line that you talked about, Dr. Stephanie. And that's what I look for in medical profession. And I wonder what you all think about that, because to me, that's the ideal. The ideal is somebody that really knows what they're doing in a technical sense and also is willing to build relationship, with their patients and be human with them.
There is nothing more powerful than communication, because we all have to do it, and we're all doing it on some level all the time. When we are talking to ourselves or thinking, that's just another word for talking to ourselves, which means that we are doing what? Communicating with ourselves. When we are verbally speaking to other people, when our body language is demonstrating communication. Communication is so important because the world runs off of communication. So when you power up your communication, you essentially power up your life. At the Soul Focus Group, we invite everybody that comes to really delve into powering up their communication, transforming the way they listen, transforming the way they speak, transforming the way they connect to people, because that is where our power is. Power up your communication, people. We all need it.
And I think the key there is being able to bring yourself and knowing what this relationship is. Because you can bring yourself and be in a patient-provider relationship, and that doesn't have to be hierarchical. And I think where it sounds like boundaries can be crossed is when people think that bringing yourself means having it be a very personal relationship, like a friend or a family member.
True. Yes.
Well, Martin, you brought something up talking about crying in front of patients. I was curious, Dr. Stephanie, what's been your experience or what's your approach with showing that kind of emotion with your patients or in front of your patients?
I'm open to it. It hasn't happened. Maybe once it may have happened. However, most of my conversations are very joyful with my patients. We may start off, somber, or if they're in a lot of pain. However, at the end of the conversation, I'm always seeking to lighten it up so that they can, move past the conditioning of, oh, this is horrible, horrible. Just like in my own experience, I could have went that route too.
Right.
And, be mindful. I'm telling y'all, I Googled every symptom. And if you go down the maze of the Google, I had all kind of stuff, right? So just be mindful. That's that inner labyrinth versus the maze, not versus, and the maze kind of way of looking at things. It's great to go in that maze because I got to revisit a lot of things I learned in medical school. However, it was not relevant for what I was experiencing to do that to myself. So just be mindful of that. But, crying in front of being very emotional. I do a lot of, I know in these day and times you don't touch. But if my patient is open to it, I will ask their permission. I'll hug them. And I'll hug them for as long as they need it. And most of the times before I hug them, we'll do breathing exercises because a lot of times they're just holding their breath and tensing up and create more stress and fear. And so just a simple 1 minute of let's do some deep breathing. Some people don't even remember how to breathe. from their diaphragm with, the belly, expanding your belly when you inhale and, exhaling, pulling in that diaphragm. So I just 1 minute to reteach them how to breathe properly. That lightens their mood. It relaxes them. And then what it does is turns their mind inward and they can hear their soul a little bit better. Because when we're stressed, we don't hear our soul. And so that's what I'm saying. A lot of times I'm emotional with them, but emotional always mean crying. Not saying that you say that, but sometimes in this society, that's what we equate it as. Like, if you don't cry, you're not sensitive, emotionally sensitive and vulnerable. But that's not, there's so many other ways to express our emotions. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And that's how I'm feeling like I'm bringing my full self, is when I just share all of my emotions. Not just if it's perceived as sad or way of thinking conditioned around this must be sad, so we got to be sad and cry. My full self is when I bring something that I don't feel that way, and I share how I feel instead of just faking it, because that's how I was taught to do it. Now, for a long time, just for example, I didn't go to funerals because that's not a sad time for me. I like celebrations of life, and it's a very happy moment for me, because I look at life as no beginning, no end. So I avoided funerals because I just felt out of place, right? And now I'm re-engaging because I'm like, maybe I can bring a different perspective to it. And open up some healing pathways around, death and dying, or the grief conversation. Because we know that death and dying pathway can definitely lead to stress.
Well, that's beautiful. I can definitely imagine you bringing so much joy to your patients, especially knowing that you do mostly home visits. Patients are very lucky.
I do 100% home visits right now.
That's amazing.
No, I was going to say this has been really awesome. I think it's an opportunity for people to see a different way of doing something. We throw the word traditional around a lot, and we talk about traditional medicine, traditional approaches to medicine, but we know that that's very much in the box, that's very much like in the Western box. But, if you really want to talk about traditional medicine, I think a lot of what you all bring is, from much older traditions than what we call Western tradition. And also, I think, does express a level of emotional vulnerability, not in that crossing lines kind of way, but in that strength of being strong in who you are as you connect to people. Because I see it really in connection. So I'm just wondering, because I know, Martina, we're about to close out. I'm wondering if you all have any specific thoughts around that, or just any closing thoughts around this topic.
Yeah. So for me, thinking about emotional vulnerability and how do we create space for that, I've been really inspired what you've shared, Dr. Stephanie. And when you talked about sort of how you create space for your patients to relate and then go back to the 360, or you do the deep breathing, it made me think a lot about when I'm doing acupuncture with my patients, that yes, there is an element of the acupuncture activating the chi and, working through the meridians. And I think there's a role for people being given 30 minutes to sit quietly in a dimly lit room to focus on their breathing and to be with themselves. That so rarely, I think, in our day do we give ourselves even just 20 or 30 minutes to sit with ourselves and have a dedicated time that's caring for ourselves, where I think that's even part of the therapy of acupuncture. It's just giving people that time. And then they can't be moving around or walking around because they have needles in them. So they're kind of made to relax and sit quietly. So I think there's a huge role just in giving ourselves time and space to care for ourselves. And I think really, I would encourage folks to tune in and say, I'm feeling stress. And I think what Dr. Stephanie said, which was really powerful for me, is that we've kind of come to believe that there's good stress. Stress can be a good thing, which yes, maybe. And I think I would push back and question, should stress be a red flag? And that should be our marker that we need to do something to take care of ourselves and treat that as the first symptom of illness and not to normalize it.
Say that again. Stress is a red flag. Yes. And not normalize it, not ignore it and take it as, oh, everybody experience stress, And the red flag will be an indicator that, here's stress and I'm not listening to something about myself. That's what the red, like when you have those indicators come on in your vehicle, like a warning sign. Let's say your tire's low.
Mm-hmm.
So we can say, oh, I'm low on attention to myself. So let me pay more attention to myself and discover what is myself trying to tell me about myself. And keep listening until you truly hear it. I know in my past, if I didn't hear it, I kept going.
Mm.
And then, this mind that we have, it runs on intelligence. So if it's not going to listen to my intelligence, it's going to run off some external intelligence. And that's what I like to call artificial nutrition for the mind. Now there's whole food or whole nutrition for your mind, which is your own intelligence. Just like artificial food that we eat in society, fast food and things in the box. Yeah, they will give us some nutrition and we could keep going. But eventually we keep eating that kind of food, we're going to break down. Same thing for the mind. Because stress starts in the mind. And then it translates into our body if we keep going. And so that red flag is that, oh, you eating some artificial intelligence. Go get some whole intelligence here. Some whole nutrition. Because your soul, your inner voice is specific for you. There's no substitute. Like I said, we can run off it for a while, but it'll eventually catch up with us. So, for me, if any message comes across in this emotional vulnerability conversation is that be bold. And for me, bold means to be in the business. B, O is of, L, living divinely. And what that means is having the courage to be obedient to what your soul, your inner voice is telling you, no matter how it's going to be accepted on the outside. Because I know for me, that was the thing that caused me to suppress when people are like, oh, that's crazy. That don't make no sense. So I would be like, oh, well, I guess my soul's voice don't have a place in this world. So what do I do with it? And that's not, so I had to develop the courage to express. Like Martin said, how do you be fully, your whole self with your patience and just in everyday life? It takes courage because you're going to be different. You're going to stand out. We're uniquely designed that way. No two people are exactly alike. So you're going to be different. And so just having the courage to just be different, be your whole self. And one more acronym I like is, living is an art. And so I use this to just remind myself every day. The A is for accept who I am 100% in every moment. And then the R is to remember who I am in every moment because you keep going, you're going to forget. We get distracted. So I got to remember. If that red flag comes up, like Martina says, oh, I'm stressed because somebody not listening to me. In that moment, remember to accept myself, my whole self. And then that T is to trust that my whole self is what is needed at that time. There's nothing else needed. If I'm only giving 99% of myself, it's still, I'm not going to be getting the whole moment reflected back to me and enjoying my whole self. But if I express my whole self, and trust that that's what's needed in that moment, my whole self, I'm going to enjoy my whole self. That's the art of living.
Well, that feels like a mic drop moment right there to me. And just the way you tied that all together, I think is beautiful. So I'll turn it over to you, Martina, but that felt like a mic drop. And I just so appreciate, Dr. Stephanie, so appreciate you coming on with us tonight.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to work with you two, Martina and Martin, in the Soul Focus Group. Such a beautiful organization.
Thank you for your vulnerability and your sharing of wisdom, Dr. Stephanie. We'll be lifting you up in our healing prayers and energy, and looking forward to talking with you again soon.
Amen. Ashe. Hallelujah.
Beautiful, beautiful.
At the Soul Focus Group, we're probably one of the first organizations in the social justice movement to find ourselves moving away from fighting against racism to creating human solidarity. What we found is that we could fight for 24 hours, 48 hours, or all our lives, and after fighting all this time, we have nothing to show for it. It's because we haven't created anything for ourselves. At the Soul Focus Group, we are one of the few organizations who have moved from fighting against racism to creating an alternative to racism. And we invite you to join us. Let's stop fighting and start creating the outcome we really want to experience.
Well, I really do hope that you, our listeners, enjoyed that. It was enjoyable for me to listen back. And, Martina, what I really liked is I like being able to, have you all talk while I was there, and listen for a while. And then I also really enjoy being able to ask specific questions. And as I said in the intro, being able to recount the experience that I had with my mother's cardiologist, who is both incredibly brilliant and also very relational. And, that to me is like the ideal. And I love that you all centered yourself and talked about what emotional vulnerability looks like for you, in the practice, and what the sort of boundaries and lines are. And so how did that conversation feel to you?
Yeah, no, I really appreciated hearing both of your perspectives on the boundaries while being emotionally vulnerable, while being relatable. Not asking, like Dr. Stephanie was saying, not asking the patient to heal you, There is still a relationship that is with certain roles, I think, in the provider-physician relationship with a patient, where we can't put a burden on a patient. They didn't come here for that, while still being able to relate
Right.
in a human way. And I think that's a delicate balance, and something that I didn't get taught in medical school, and is something I'm still learning. So having that conversation was really helpful for me.
Awesome. And I really feel like, and I've said this before, but I bet it was helpful for a lot of our listeners too, because it's really that window in, and it's definitely true for medicine, but it's true for our listeners that are, social workers, and because we have a lot of people in sort of human service, serving humans, people, humans serving other humans and interacting. And so that's always going to be an issue. I know it was for me when I was in social work, to try to figure out how to be really relational and also, sort of appropriate in terms of boundaries too.
No, absolutely. And I think it would apply to really every single profession,
Right.
like even retail. I think everything we have to find,
Mm.
there is a certain role we're playing. So how do we respect that role and try to bring in the human connection through emotional vulnerability, right?
That is a good point. That really is. Well, anything else that you want to reflect on, now that we've listened to both parts, or now that our listeners have listened to both parts of Dr. Stephanie talking about emotional vulnerability in the healthcare field and in medical practices?
Yeah, I want to share my gratitude again with Dr. Stephanie for her vulnerability in sharing what's been going on with her, and what emotional vulnerability has looked like for her in healing and then also as a provider to her patients, who I know appreciate her and value her so much. So just lifting up my gratitude to her.
Absolutely. And mine as well. I love Dr. Steph, and she's awesome, and she's always awesome on these podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to thank you. I want to thank Dr. Stephanie, and I want to thank all of our listeners for being with us and helping us grow. And we want you to go to soulfocusgroup.com. And I've been saying we're going to have a brand new website, Martina, for about 6 months. I keep saying at the end of the month. I really think we're going to have it at the end of November 2022. I don't know when people are listening to this, but I really believe our brand new website will be up, by December of this year. And I can't wait for people to see it. It's a whole new interface, totally user-friendly, a lot more information. And so just really excited. So please come and check us out and be on the journey with us. Know that we love each and every one of you, and are just excited for you to be a part of what we're doing, this emotional vulnerability work and the healing from trauma work and all of that. And we're happy to have you with us. Right, Martina?
Absolutely. We're honored that folks tune in.
Yes. And we want all of those folks to stay safe, stay well, and most of all, stay soul focused.